Hello, my loves. Today's podcast episode is one from the archives that I recorded about 2 years ago. And I was talking about parenting even before I knew I was going to become a parent coach one day into the future. So enjoy this episode. It's all about how to become a more conscious, present, patient parent. This is a question that I get asked often on all my consult calls, which are, by the way, all taken for the month of August. But parents always want to know, how do I become more patient? How do I be more present with my children? And I share 6 tips with you on how to accomplish that. Enjoy the episode and let me know what you think. Hello, Becoming You listeners. Welcome to today's episode. And today I'm going to be sharing with you on how to become a more patient and present parent. Now, that's a lot of P's. So, I wanted to share 7 tips with you on my own journey of becoming a more present parent and a more patient parent. So, the way I parent today is very different from how I used to parent. I used to feel a lot of shame and guilt around my parenting. It was very reactionary. I was very, I would say, short tempered, and I would lose it very quickly with my children when they were young. And afterward, there would always be so much remorse and guilt. And I would always worry about the type of parent that I was becoming. I did not want to become one of those parents where my kids felt scared around me. I didn't want them to have this feeling that, mom just never understands. And I didn't want to close off our communication portals. But I could tell that as my kids got older and were old enough to express their opinions and views, and they were old enough that, they could physically push away and run away when they become more mobile and independent, it was very hard to control them physically, right? And it starts to become this mental game. And I just always felt very down. And once we've had our interactions, and I did not want to be that parent anymore. So I'm going to share a lot of personal stories and ups and downs that we have been through in as a family. But first, I want to share one of the top tips that I can give you to become a more patient and present parent. Is you guys know, or you're very familiar with my own journey of self-love and how self-love continues to transform every aspect of my life. And I can tell you that as I began to heal the relationship with myself, the relationship that I had with my kids changed. And this is kind of the overarching theme to all the other points and tips that I'm going to give you today. But I feel like a broken record almost every episode, and I share this almost every week, is that when you heal your relationship with yourself, honestly, every relationship in your life starts to transform and change without you even having to try much. It's that saying of when you change, your whole world changes around you because you start to look at the world differently and you show up to the world differently because you see yourself differently. So the first tip I want to give you is that start taking care of your own needs first. Now, as mothers, as parents, we are told that you are a good parent when you do everything for your kids and take care of your kids' needs and never, leave for anything that they might want. Like, do everything possible to make your kids happy. And the happier your kids are, the more proud of ourselves in a way we feel, right, as being a good parent because we've provided everything for them in order for them to be successful. But here's the downside of trying to do that. When we take care of our kids' needs first, their hunger, their sleep, we don't want to allow them to feel any kind of hardship in life. So it might start off by having to ask them to do their laundry, help out around the house. And you might be hungry and they might be hungry. And as moms, we always tend to make them a meal first before we tend to make ourselves a meal. So what tends to happen with that is we feel more and more depleted over time. And so our kids' demands just start to feel more demanding and we feel more drained. And because of our lack of setting boundaries, we start to resent our kids. You probably don't consciously realize this, But when our kids demand so much of us, and it is their job too, right? That's what kids do. When they demand so much of us, we are the ones who need to make sure that our engine is full so that we can serve them in the best possible way. So that means putting yourself first. Have you had enough sleep? Right? How many of us are the last ones to crash into bed because we've taken care of everything that needs to be taken care of? I'm guilty of doing this. And in fact, the last couple of weeks, I have been running myself ragged because it feels like there is so much to do and there is not enough time. As the world opens up, and in the US, COVID is no longer a reality for us. And if you're not in the US, I'm sorry if you're hearing this and it feels like a trigger. I apologize. But life is starting to get back to normal again, where the social calendar is being filled up. And I am doing a lot of professional development for my work. So my bucket feels so full, but in the wrong way. There's no space in my life right now to fill my buckets with things that energize me. So the best advice that I can give you is please put yourself first. Get plenty of sleep, get plenty of rest. Feed yourself first. Go out for that bike ride, go out for that run, and ask your spouse to look after the kids while you go get some fresh air. And it is okay to do that. Because once you have done that, you're going to come back and you're going to have the capacity to listen and to not decipher is not the right word. The word has escaped my mind, but you're going to have the capacity to, let's just go with deciphered, to decipher what is a real immediate need and demand from your children versus what can wait. And, we're not going to resent them for asking for the things that they need, and we're not going to resent them while we deliver and serve their needs. So recapping what point number 1 is, stop putting your kids first, put yourself first. Then your kids are going to feel so taken care of, and you're going to have the patience to take care of their needs. Okay, second point that I want to share with you is connect with your inner child. Okay, if you told me this a few years ago, I would have had no idea what that meant. But we all have an inner child within us. There is a childlike version of us inside of us. That's the part of us that connects to fun and joy and playfulness and the spontaneity. And, when there's summer rain, you run out and you want to be in the rain. That's all of the inner child's, that part of us that looks at the world with curiosity and wonder, just like our kids do. So why is it important to connect with this inner child? The more inner child work I did, the more I listened to what she needed, I also became very accepting of her. Okay, and the more accepting I became of her, the more I started to love her unconditionally, right? I was able to give my inner child the things that I had wished for as a child and maybe I didn't receive. You know that feeling when you are dismissed as a child, or when you felt like you were having the worst day and somebody just kind of laughed it off and made something major that was major to you, made it into something minor that made you feel dismissed. Or as a child, when maybe you felt like you were always being rushed, or you were judged for something that you did, or you felt invisible or insignificant. All of those memories are stored within us, in us at a cellular level in our bodies. And we carry those things around all our life until we meet up with our inner child and we see her and hold space for her wounds and give her the type of support and acceptance and love that she craved or he craved at the time that these wounds occurred. So the reason connecting with your inner child is so important is that you start to see life through the child's perspective, right? And what better way to relate to your children than seeing life through their eyes? And the easiest way to do that is to see and connect to your own inner child. You don't have to get into how does my child see the world? You just have to become a child yourself. And the way to do that is to connect to your inner child. And when you start to do that, you start to have more patience for your kids because you start to realize how life felt when you were young, how powerless you felt, how out of control maybe sometimes life felt, and how a lot of decisions were taken away from you just because you were a child. Nobody ever asked you, is that what you want? Right? And so when we start to see life through another person's perspective other than our own, we start to develop so much empathy and patience for what that other person might be going through, i.e., in this case, it's your child. So the more I have connected to my own inner child, the more I see instances where she was hurt, where she was in pain, or she was crying out for love, but she never had the courage to ask for love, the more I understand when my children are having a meltdown or a tantrum, that it's never truly about the meltdown or the tantrum. They're not doing it just to get attention. Well, they are doing it to get attention, but it's something much deeper at play. It's not, they're not having a tantrum because they don't want to have the thing that you have served for dinner that night. They are just asking to be seen, right? In that instance, they want their voice to be heard. And so what can we do in terms of accommodation? It's a fine balance between drawing balance, but also allowing them to express themselves. So connect with your inner child, and connecting with the inner child work is a lot of what I do in my line of work with my private clients and in my group coaching and all my programs. Self-love cannot happen without us acknowledging all the different parts of ourselves, including our inner child. Now, this is slightly off track, but I am launching a brand new 6-month mastermind for 10 women. And a large portion, probably 1 month of this mastermind, we're going to be focusing on connecting to our inner child and healing our inner child, because this work is so powerful. This is work that I continue to do today in my own life. In fact, I just had a coaching session about 2 weeks ago with a coach that I am with in a group program. And we did a session where I connected with my inner child, and I kind of felt angry because we healed a memory that I have healed so many times in the past. But as she mentioned it, it was the truth, is that I asked her, why do I keep going back to this memory? It doesn't matter how many times I do the healing work, I always seem to end up back here. And I said, am I just making it up, or, what is it? And she said, this is a portal for you. This is a portal of huge pain. And it was a defining moment in your life. And it has left a lot of, deep imprints within you. So, whenever there is a portal for pain, when you walk through that, there's a portal for healing on the other side. It also becomes a huge portal for healing. So it only makes sense that you keep going back to this, because there are so many different levels and aspects of it that need to be healed, so many different dimensions. And so it's okay. And I share that example with you because the inner child work is not a once and done. It is a continuous connection that needs to be built and maintained. And the more you connect to your inner child, the easier it becomes to connect with your own children. The third tip I want to share is, how do you react to their mistakes, right? This has been such an pivotal change in the relationship with my own kids, is the more I have learned to be accepting of my own mistakes, and the easier I find it to forgive myself where I have fallen short of my own expectations, the easier it becomes to not yell at my kids when they make a mistake. So this is like real-time news, but I just had an interaction with someone where they felt taken advantage of because of me and my actions. And I see her point of view, and I feel a lot of shame and guilt around what's happened. And this literally happened like 30 minutes ago. And I felt it all. I felt the shame. I felt the hurt that I might have caused. I felt that they were disappointed in me, and I feared that the trust we had built had been broken because of my actions. And it was on the tip of my tongue to make excuses and not take responsibility for what had happened. But I didn't step into that space, and instead I sat with the shame that I felt, but I also was able to forgive myself. It wasn't like a bypassing. I really did sit with the shame. I took responsibility for the mistake and the act that I had committed. And I took actions to correct what had been done, but just as swiftly, I forgave myself. Did I fully believe the forgiveness? Did I receive it fully? I'm not sure yet. I'll have to go back and revisit again what has happened. But I could sense both sides of what was happening. I could sense the shame inside of me. I could sense my inner child. I had to reach out to her and make her feel it was okay. Because remember that anytime we are triggered and we feel shame in today's life, it is a re-triggering of something that has happened in the past. So it's not just about feeling ashamed with what's happened today. It was about feeling the shame of whenever this had happened in the past to create this wound in the first place. So because I'm so used to doing this work, I can do this in minutes. But for those of you who are new, it might take a while to understand how to navigate your inner world in this way. But coming back to the point of why is this important, I need to forgive myself for all my mistakes, because if I don't, then I will judge and I will criticize and I will hold a grudge. And guess what's going to happen? You will apply the same set of rules to anyone else that makes a mistake against you. So if your kids make a mistake, if they spill a glass of milk, or you've told them not to do something and they go ahead and do it anyway, and it's a big disaster because they did it, right? You are going to judge and criticize and hold a grudge against them for not having listened to you. So how you react to their mistake has a lot to do with your own reaction to your own mistakes. When you have less judgment on yourself, you will also tend to judge your children's mistake less, okay? So start giving yourself more grace for the mistakes that you make. Start being more accepting of your imperfections and your shortcomings. And you will stop placing so much pressure on your kids to get it right the first time as well. You will take a deep breath and allow the mistake to have occurred and accept them for making that mistake without judging them and criticizing them. Number 4, stop tying your self-worth and your assessment of how good a parent you are based on your children's performance. Okay, what I mean by that is most of us, when our kids are well behaved in public and we get compliments on them, we tend to pat ourselves on the back and feel really, really good about ourselves as a parent. And if we're outside and they misbehave in Target because they want something and they're having a meltdown, we cower inside of embarrassment. And we tell them, just stop it, stop embarrassing me. And we take it upon as a personal reflection of our abilities as a parent when our kids behave and when they misbehave. So what this means is that you are placing subtle pressure on your kids to meet certain expectations, to meet your expectations, so that you can feel a sense of accomplishment and pride. Okay, now this might sound really cold and abrupt listening to this. You're like, why else did I have kids? If you had kids because you wanted them to fulfill your dreams in some way, that in itself creates kind of a rift in the relationship that you have, because you are not now letting them live their life. You are now wanting them to live a life where they meet your expectations. So when you stop tying their results, right? Their results as a kid. What are their academic results? What are their extracurricular activity results? Are they somebody who's interested in a lot of activities and really put themselves out there? Are they outgoing? Are they respectful? When you are constantly assessing their performance, right? And I'm doing air quotes, their performance, and then you are allowing you are assessing yourself based on their performance, then of course it's going to create a problem in your relationship, because you're saying everything you do reflects upon me and the type of parent I am and what other people think of me as a parent. And we don't want to do that, because that's not fair to our children and it's not fair to you. So stop tying your self-worth to your children's results, whether that's academic, whether that's behavior, right? Whether it's the ability to express themselves creatively, whatever values that we place on a pedestal. So maybe consistency and reliability, punctuality are all values that you value highly, right? And if your kid is always late, you're internally groaning. Just because it's an important value to you does not mean that it has to be an important value to your children. So understand that your values might not be the same as your kids, and that's okay. And you don't have to, bemoan the fact that you're not a good parent just because your kids' values are not aligned to yours. I think what's really helped me with my children is that their misbehavior is not a reflection of my parenting abilities, right? Of course, I'm going to step in and try to help them and correct that misbehavior. But I'm not saying I'm a bad parent because my child is misbehaving, right? I'm doing the best that I can. I'm not a bad parent or a great parent. My child is just being a child. Okay, tip number 5 is holding space. Now, holding space is a term in therapy and coaching. Holding space for your kids when they're experiencing big feelings, okay? And I call it big feelings because it's not bad behavior, okay? When our kids are having a meltdown, when they're lying to us, when they're talking back to us, we cannot coin it as bad behavior because, again, then we are judging them, right? And anytime judgment is involved, you're coming from a place of fear, and we're already putting up a wall and protecting ourselves, and it does not allow for open communication. So I've realized that in the past, I used to try and fix my kids' behavior that didn't fit. It didn't sit comfortably with me, right? Whenever they were having a meltdown. Like, for instance, my kids recently came back one day. They're in camp. And my 7-year-old came back, and one of his friends that he loves had not come to camp that day. And he hadn't passed his swim test on the first day of camp. And he said, it is the worst day ever. Now, normally as a parent, we might laugh it off and be like, oh my gosh, is that all? Like, is that what you're so upset about, right? Because he was in tears about it. And the old me would have probably diminished it as nothing and laughed it off and said, oh my gosh, it'll be okay. Don't worry about it, right? But because I have connected to my inner child, I realize how I look at life through a child's eyes, which is, yes, from their perspective, that is the worst day ever. One of his closest friends was not there, and he passed his swim test, which probably would have meant that he felt embarrassed. He probably didn't feel good enough, and he probably felt left behind because he saw a lot of the kids pass the swim test. So, diminishing their feelings, creates separation. You don't have to fix anything, right? When our kids are feeling big feelings, we do not have to be responsible for fixing them. We just have to take responsibility for being a witness to it. And witnessing means you give them the space to express whatever feelings and emotions are coming up without judging it, without telling them to change it or adjust it. When we start to do that, it creates so much safety for our children to feel whatever feelings that they're feeling. And as a parent, that is our job, to create a safe space for our kids to express their emotions fully, and for us to tell them, it's okay for you to feel all these feelings. I am right here and I am not going anywhere, right? It is that ability for us to handle and allow their discomfort to be witnessed. And that is so powerful. And it also then brings you closer, because after they've calmed down, you can talk about what's happened, which brings me to their next point. Number 6 is that you can ask them and guide them to draw conclusions of their own instead of telling them what to do. Okay, we are so quick to tell our kids, don't do that, do it this way, right? And I'm guilty of it too. I am not a perfect parent. But after a huge meltdown or miscommunication or a misunderstanding, when both parties have calmed down, I will often come back and say, do you want to talk about it? Or I want to talk about it. I want to hear it from your perspective. What happened? What did you feel? Where did you feel it in your body? How do you think we could have handled it better? Okay, and I apologize. So I'm always asking them open-ended questions, not yes/no questions. How did that make you feel when this happened? Right? That's a big question in our household, is that how did that make you feel? They'll often come back and say, I don't know, but it's important to start asking that question, because feelings need to be felt, and feelings are often a compass for us to know what went wrong. And our kids, this is a longer process, but what will happen is your kids will feel much more empowered, right? And their capacity to handle their own emotions and feelings will increase as well, because you are okay sitting with their emotions. They too will be okay with sitting their emotions and then doing like a postmortem on it to realize what's happened. So become the guide and guide them to discovering what the lessons were from what happened. What can they do differently next time from preventing it from happening? Right? Yesterday, my child told me that he has not been taking care of himself hygienically. And so he's now got, some discomfort in his body. I won't go into the details, but he's got some discomfort in his body. And this is not the first time it's happened. This is a recurring pattern, even though we remind him many times of how to take care of his body in a way that he can keep it healthy, right? And this was like the third or fourth time this has happened. And it was so close on the tip of my tongue to say, I told you so, but I did not, because I know that creates a rift between us and a distance that I don't want. So instead I said, how many times do you think it's going to take you to learn this lesson? And he kind of just shrugged his shoulders and walked away. He already has learned the lesson. There's no reason for me to kind of twist that knife in his back, because the discomfort he's already feeling is enough of a consequence, right? And we just need to accept that it'll take our kids several times to learn a very important lesson. And we can't rush that process. We just have to be a witness to it and guide them so that the lesson is learned over and over and over again until it becomes a permanent lesson that they have learned. Okay? And share your mistakes with them. Our kids idolize us and they place us on a pedestal. And the worst thing that we can do is to pretend like we are perfect, right? If you have a similar example from your own childhood to share with your children when something goes wrong, like when they have forgotten something or when they have been bullied, right, and they're upset, sharing your own experiences of when you went through it as a child really helps them feel safe. It's okay to share your mistakes. It's okay to share your mishaps. It's okay to share your misfortunes with your kids. Because again, remember, if you have healed your relationship with yourself and you've healed your relationship with your inner child, vulnerability then becomes a superpower that you can share with your kids. When you open up your heart and share things from your past where you have messed up, it doesn't mean that your kids are going to mess up. It means you build trust and you let them know that, hey, I made a mistake too and I learned from it and I came out of it okay. It is an opportunity for you to build a bridge with them. Okay, so don't try to behave in a way that puts you on a pedestal to them, right? Because then that leads to hiding things from us and things like that. What I have found is that when I'm vulnerable with my kids and sometimes I tell them, I don't know the answer, let's figure it out together. It actually makes them feel safer because they're like, oh, mom's human. Like I can approach her with stuff. It's okay. If she knows that she's going to help me. If she doesn't, we're going to figure it out together. All right. So those are my 6 tips for today on how to become a more conscious and patient and present parent. You have been listening to the Becoming You podcast. I am your host, Visa Shanmugam. If you want to experience breathwork for yourself, sign up for bi-monthly breathwork workshops for free. You can attend these from anywhere in the world. You can sign up for Becoming You Breathwork by clicking on the link in the show notes. And finally, I need your help. I am on a big mission to help women step into their true power, wisdom, and beauty so they can show up as themselves and feel free. When women step into their power, they help elevate the whole world. And here's what you can do to help. Share this podcast with anyone who is on board with this mission. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and write a review of the podcast if you love it.